30 miles away offshore, on the island of Nantucket, a haven for readers and writers, the Nantucket Book Festival presents its answer to social distancing. I'm Jane Alexander, Nantucket Book Festival alumna, welcoming you to At Home with Authors.
Hi, this is Michael Schulder. I'm the executive producer and host of At Home with Authors. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're already a repeat visitor, we are thrilled to hear that. And we have good news for you. We're going to be continuing these conversations with the Nantucket Book Festival's featured 2020 authors all summer long, as well as conversations with some surprise guests. So we hope that you'll make At Home with Authors part of your summer 2020 routine. Today's episode is an enlightening, informative, and funny back and forth between two great novelists, Nantucket's own Elin Hilderbrand and Jami Attenberg. We're going to bring you that conversation in a minute, but first, we just wanted to mark today, Memorial Day, with a very powerful piece of poetry that we came across. The poem is by an American serviceman who lost his life during the war in Vietnam. His name is Michael O'Donnell. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him and how we discovered his poem right after you hear the reading of it. The poem is called Letters from Pleiku. Michael O'Donnell wrote it a few months before his death. And to read the poem, we called on Nantucket Book Festival author alum Kevin Powers. Kevin is author of the Iraq War novel, The Yellow Birds. He himself is a veteran of the Iraq War. We'll be in conversation with him later this summer, but for now, we'd like you to listen to Kevin Powers reading Michael O'Donnell's poem, Letters from Pleiku.
Letters from Pleiku. If you are able, save for them a place inside of you, and save one backward glance when you are leaving for the places they can no longer go. Be not ashamed to say you love them, though you may or may not have always. Take what they have left and what they have taught you with their dying, and keep it with your own. And in that time when men decide and feel safe to call the war insane, take one moment to embrace those gentle heroes you left behind. Captain Michael O'Donnell, New Year's Day, 1970.
The quick backstory on that poem, the reason Letters from Pleiku was even on our radar at this moment was that it was the launching point for one of our featured authors, Daniel Weiss. He's the president and CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He stumbled upon that poem a number of years ago in an anthology. It moved him so deeply that he set out on a multi-year quest to tell the full story of Michael O'Donnell. He has done so exquisitely and given us a very short, powerful history of the Vietnam War to boot in context. The book is called In That Time. We will be posting our conversation with him next month. That's Daniel Weiss, In That Time. So we're going to put that aside from now and basically enter the summer. And who better to bring us into the summer than Nantucket's own Elin Hilderbrand, who by many is known as the queen of the summer beach read. She's on, I believe, her 26th novel. Her latest one is called Summer of '69, set in the same time period we just left with Captain Michael O'Donnell. Summer of '69, #1 New York Times bestselling author year after year. When we spread the word that Jami Attenberg, who's now on her 7th book, All This Could Be Yours, was going to be joining us on At Home with Authors, and we asked people in our community who would be interested in speaking with her, Elin Hilderbrand responded immediately. She said All This Could Be Yours was one of her favorite books of the year. And so we have Elin Hilderbrand at her home in Nantucket and Jami Attenberg at her home in New Orleans, which is why we call this episode Elin and Jami, ACT to NOLA. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the acronyms, Nantucket to New Orleans. We hope you enjoy.
So Jami, I have to start with asking, how are things in New Orleans vis-a-vis the pandemic? The state of mind, the emotional state of mind.
So we were a hot spot that has considerably cooled. I think last week we had a couple days in a row where we didn't have anyone pass away from it, which was really great. And things have calmed down a little bit. They're starting to sort of open a couple of things the governor just announced. I can actually get my hair done next week, which is like amazing. I know, I'm so excited. But of course, I was willing to wait it out for as long as it was. But as soon as he sort of said you can open at a limited amount, I was like texting my my hairdresser immediately. So I think things are sort of calming down. I think the biggest problem that we're going to see is is when the unemployment benefits run out, which will be end of June. So it's hard to say right now what's going to happen in terms of the economy. And that's really the greatest fear right now, is because we're a tourist-based economy. I mean, I wonder. You've been in the Caribbean, right? Like how they were dealing with a tourist-based economy, and losing that as well.
I mean, it's very, very tough. Nantucket as well. But so I've been to New Orleans. I've been to New Orleans 5 times. 4 times was for Jazz Fest, which obviously was canceled.
Yeah.
So when you have something like Jazz, which I can only imagine brings in hundreds of millions of dollars, and then that doesn't happen, that is a huge.
People make, musicians and artists and food vendors and things like that, they all make like a lot of money for, like a good percentage of their annual income comes in these spring months. And now we're going to roll into the summer. We're not going to have that. So I don't know. It's a really tricky time, but people are, this is a really resilient city, and, there's a lot of actually like incredible volunteer structures that were in place that sort of like really kicked in immediately as soon as things started to happen, which was really amazing. I mean, you tried to volunteer for things and you couldn't volunteer because they had so many volunteers, and so it's just been kind of amazing to watch how people work together on this. And I don't know. I feel we have a good governor and we have a good mayor, and I'm feeling optimistic, but a very tempered optimism, because we still have so far to go, obviously, not just here but in America and in the world. So, but it's been lovely weather. It's been really lovely weather. So, yeah.
I feel like, to your point, when I was in the Caribbean, in St. John specifically, because they had just gone through Irma and Maria, that, decimated them. It was a Katrina. It was a category, both 2 Category 5 storms back to back, 8 days apart.
Yeah.
That their coping muscles, like you're saying, like their coping muscles were already really well developed. So something like this, they're like, okay, well, we still have power, we still have water, we're not being, no one has lice, like we're not being infiltrated by bugs, and our house isn't lying in a pile of rubble at our feet. And so they really, I think, and in the Virgin Islands, were able to take it much more in stride. And so that sounds sort of like what you're describing in New Orleans, who've already been through the apocalypse essentially, yes, and have rebuilt.
I think,
and so that.
A lot of people have mentioned to me, because I wasn't here for Katrina because I was still in New York City, but a lot of people who I'm friends with here who lived through Katrina said it's actually a lot easier in a way, because we used to go and try to work and rebuild things, and then we'd come home at night and we didn't have electricity and we didn't have water and any kind of power. And so that was really they're like, this is sort of a luxury in comparison, because we have all of our all of our utilities are functioning. We have the internet, we have those kinds of things, gas, so I think it feels a little bit different to people, and perhaps full of a little bit more possibility.
I agree.
Yeah.
So your novel, we're going to talk a little bit about, we'll start by talking about All This Could Be Yours. I just want to start by saying it was one of my favorite books of 2019. It was a surprise to me, not that I didn't expect that I was going to like it, but I loved this book so much.
Thank you.
I loved it. And why did I love it? Well, I don't want to give anything away, but the premise is not new, right? The premise is patriarch dies, family gathers, and then all the secrets come out, it sounds like, when I say that, it sounds like, oh, it's just one of those books, but the book is so much more than that. And the reveal 2/3 of the way through is, it's set up so perfectly, and then And you even sort of warned me about it, and I still didn't get it until I got it. And I was screaming, like, this is the best thing I've ever read. So anyway, for anybody who's watching this, very worth a while to pick up All This Could Be Yours. But among the many, many things that I loved about it was the atmospheric and emotional connection to New Orleans. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, why you decided to settle there, and how you felt about writing about it, and how the people of New Orleans have sort of reacted to the book? Because there's a lot of wonderful, rich detail about post-Katrina, like post-traumatic stress disorder of the city of its rebirth. So, I mean, I'd love to hear you talk about that.
So I moved down here. I bought my house down here. February will be 4 years. But I was coming in the winters for probably about 3 years before that, 3 or 4 years before that, for 2 or 3 months at a time. And I just had fallen in love with it. And I lived in New York City for a really long time. And I was just never, I mean, weird, because I lived there for I think I lived there for like 16 years or something. And the whole time I was like, I don't think this is really where I'm going to end up. And I kept looking and searching for all these places. And then New Orleans really, this is what happens if you come down here and spend any amount of time, it sort of gets under your skin a little bit, because it's a really fun, vibrant place, and but also really complicated, and it just has a really complex past and present, and it's a very haunted place. And I find all those things really fascinating. And also to be able to buy a house really meant a lot to me as a working writer. It's not always a dream that can happen for a working writer, and it certainly wasn't going to be happening for me in New York City, which is a very expensive place. So that it became, and it's just me, and working on my own, and so it was really a dream come true to be able to buy my own little house and to land somewhere that I really loved. In terms of writing about it, I've written a bunch of books that were set in New York, a couple that were set in the Midwest, which is where I'm originally from. And I was very hesitant. I don't know if you've had this experience before. I was really hesitant to write about this place right away. It took me a couple years to really figure it out, how I wanted to approach it, because I'm protective of it, and the city is very protective of itself, and I didn't want to get it wrong. I don't know if you've had that experience about writing about a place where you're like, it's going to take me a minute to get there.
Yeah. Right. Well, St. John, just because I don't live there, I don't own property there. Nantucket is one thing. I've been here 26 years. And, my kids were born and raised here. That's all fine. But then when I went down to St. John, I was very nervous. I was very nervous about, and that's a very small, tight-knit community, so there's no way to like sort of pretend you didn't. I don't. There's like, everyone knows you wrote the book.
Yeah, right.
Or the books, and everyone's talking about it, so you really want to make sure you get it right. And that, I guess, is why I ask.
Yeah, you do really. Yeah. And having written about New York City, it's such a massive, sprawling place, and there's so many access points for that city. I mean, I've written about it in, the 1970s version of it, and the Bowery, Depression era. I've written contemporary times about it. And you could there's just all these ways in, and no one ever says you didn't get New York right, because it's all sort of possible there. But here, if you get it wrong, you're going to hear about it. So I was really really nervous about it. And then at some point I just thought, just do what you do, and do it here. And you can do all the work that you would ordinarily do if you were researching something, and be thoughtful and talk to people and get good readers, which I did. I had four native New Orleanian readers on this book, and do the work. And like, I've been, this is my 7th book, and I've been publishing for about 15 years. And I think that if you have like the right intentions for what you're writing, like I didn't feel like I was grabbing New Orleans for myself. It was just like a genuine personal and artistic involvement with this place. And if all those things are sort of in place, then I'm ready to go. So that was you know, I was ready. I had something to say about it. And then in terms of how it's been received, I mean, so far so good. It's gotten, I've had readings, people come to the readings. I've gotten emails from people. I know book clubs have been doing it, but all different kinds of readers on it. And so I think that, most of the characters are who have moved there post Katrina, and that's 30% of the population at this point. So it's sort of valid to write about coming in from that perspective. And so that was kind of my way into it, is having this family, this dysfunctional family, some of whom live down there. Some of them are coming in for the funeral, or not the funeral, but just sort of, not the funeral, but the dying father. There is no funeral, obviously. But some people have been like, I don't know. It's been really good feedback for it. So I'm happy so far with how it's turned out. I don't think I'm going to write I'm working on a nonfiction book now, so I don't think I will be doing another novel about New Orleans again for a while. So this one.
Okay, that's too bad. Honestly, like, I do think that's too bad, because one of the things that I really reacted to, and I am I've been to New Orleans 5 times in the last 10 years. I love it so much. I only get it in small bites. It has its own thing going on, right? So, yeah. But I have found it, like, and maybe I'm not looking in the right places, you see New Orleans in a lot of contemporary fiction.
It's very true. It's very true.
There's Walker. Is Walker Percy a New Orleans writer? I'm trying to, like, but
he's like from a long time ago. We have like a nice, we have a nice group of writers here, but people who are publishing novels, it's very few, and a lot of stuff is not set. Like I'm one of the few novelists who was like writing it in contemporary, like a contemporary day-to-day existence kind of novel. So I will do it again, but I am writing about it in my nonfiction book. It's like kind of an essay memoir kind of thing. So it's just that I won't get to write fiction again for another year or two or whatever it's going to be. So I would write it about it again, but I also feel like I will write about lots of things in my life. I have written about lots of things. So I don't think I will write the next 5 novels will be set in New Orleans for me. I don't know. I don't think so. No. I mean, what if I did though? That sounds it does sound very juicy and fun to do. I just keep having all my characters having affairs, like you're in your books, and have it all be very juicy. I mean, people do have affairs there.
I feel like, well, it's just, that was one of the things that struck me, is like, here's a place I love. Here's a place a lot of people love, and we get to read about it and sort of get the behind. That was one of the things I really, really loved about the book. How did your book tour go? What kind of things did surprised you, like people's reactions to the book? How was your publishing experience? I guess that's my question. Like, how was birthing the book, bringing it out to the world? How did that all go for you?
I did a really long tour. I feel like your tours are like a month. Am I making that up?
They're only 2 weeks. They're like 17, 2 weeks.
You hit exactly. You have like your exact places that you go to, and exactly what works. But for me, I feel like I still end up like trying some places that, some newer places. And so it's always a little bit of an experiment for me when I go out on tour. So it was stretched out over a 2-month period. It was kind of a long tour. I found that, and you already have this experience, I'm sure, on a regular basis, but it's interesting to now have people who've been reading me for a while show up at events.
Right.
Where they're like, this is, and sometimes, when you're in a faster pace than I am, but for me, like, I'm once every 2 years. And so sometimes when you go out, no one's read your book yet. And then when you go out on the next tour, it's like you're hearing about what you wrote 2 years ago. Like they're showing up and they want to talk to you then about your last book, right? So that's kind of an interesting experience. I have this project that I do that's called 1,000 Words of Summer, which is it's just once a year, but it's people write 1,000 words a day with me for 2 weeks, and I send out emails, and I have different guest contributors. I'm going to ask you if you will do it, actually, and later I will. And so that was really cool because it's the first time I've had people who've participated in that have shown up for my events. And so they were like coming and talking to me about their writing projects and what they got out of the 1,000 words. So that was actually really sweet and emotional, and meant like a great deal to me to like meet all these new people that were coming because of my writing, but also coming because of like community projects that I've done. So it felt sort of bigger because of that. I would say the general reception to the book in terms of critically has been wonderful. Like I couldn't really ask for better reviews, and just across the board, like I just even, when you get that first week where like everyone's like, it's great, and you're like, yay, what a relief. So I had like a really great, in particular, like a really great first week where like every review that showed up was just like really wonderful. And so I think it was like I think it went pretty well. And then I was going to do a second round of it, obviously, this spring. Like I had more stuff to do. I had a big European tour planned that was going to be amazing. Like I've never toured in Germany before. I was going to do German, like all these cities in Germany and London and Belfast and Dublin. And it all went away. And that was like my one sad. Really, truly, like my one like little personal, I mean, I have big sadness for so many people and so many things that are going on, but my one little moment where I was like, I'm just going to say this out loud. It makes me sad that I can't go to Europe and go and meet people. And it's just such an incredible, touring, it can be such an incredible experience where it just can change, your outlook, right? You know.
Yeah, I don't actually like to tour. Or I didn't think that I did, and now it looks like I'm not going on tour, and I'm feeling very upset about that. I'm feeling very upset. So upset that I'm actually asking my publisher to send me out on tour, at least a couple places. And they're kind of like, oh, I don't know. But, we'll see.
It's a rhythm to your life. It's a rhythm where you think, well, I know I'm going to go away and it's going to be, and it's work, but also like it's a good kind of work. And even if it can be physically, to me, I find it a little physically taxing as I'm getting older. But it's like, it's a rhythm, and now your rhythm is like a little bit off. Not just yours, but lots of people. So it's kind of, it'll make you appreciate it. I mean, I guess I was in Los Angeles right before lockdown, and I hung out with Susan Orlean, and she was still touring. They were still kind of sending her out on tour, and what they were doing at that time was she would go and she would speak and she would sign books in a different room. So she never actually engaged. She never. So it is possible, perhaps, to do it in that way where you don't.
And then did she have like the sticky notes on it? Like how did she, or
I don't
happen to know? Like, could personalize?
That's interesting. I don't know, but there's probably a way to do it. It's just the getting everyone in the room. I mean, you could stand.
Yeah, be done. Like you couldn't do, so like I had some events that were cocktail parties. Those were all obviously off. Anything where I was going to stand in an auditorium and speak is off. But so what I asked is, could I do bookstore tours where I went to the bookstore and people were spaced like they are at the grocery store, like waiting, or they get assigned a time slot and they come through, and I don't know if there's plexiglass, but I can at least see them. They can see me. They can take a picture. I can sign their book, hand it through the plexiglass, with gloves or whatever. I'm like, can we do it this way? And I may give it a shot. We don't know. It's still 5 weeks away. I can't get my hair done because Massachusetts is behind you guys.
Oh, yeah.
But it's talking, eventually I'll be able to. So,
and then you don't want to like waste that hair. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how. I mean, I have a paperback coming out in September, and I just think, well, it's just going to be Zoom. I mean, I'm just going to be doing Zoom stuff for it, and that's it, and that's the way the world is. And then I'm looking towards. I'm supposed to be doing the Key West Literary Festival in January, and that's what I'm thinking my first event will be, is in January 2021.
Oh, let's hope so. I mean, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back, Jami. Let's go back because, and I do know about your 1,000 words of summer challenge, but let's go back to when you got started, because obviously you have a huge following of people who want to be writers, right? I think every novelist probably has a lot of people reading them and following them and watching them who would like to be published someday. So can you take me through sort of your story of origin as far as publishing goes, and how did you get published the first time?
So I did not get an MFA. So I was kind of more finding myself by writing on the internet and writing a little bit for print magazines and chapbooks and things like that. And then I had some short stories that I was writing, and I had a friend who gave me a place to stay in Napa for a summer. And so this would have been 2004. And I had to watch a dog while I was there, like a really bad Tibetan Mastiff, like a really cranky dog. That was like, the trade-off was you watch this dog and then you can have this little cabin. And so I would just hang out, and I didn't have a car. So I was just like hanging out in the middle of the woods with this dog. And so I had read somewhere that if you just wrote 1,000 words a day, you do 1,000, I think, right? Yeah. If you do.
I really do try not to pigeonhole myself. I just,
Yeah. I appreciate all your process posts, by the way. It drives me. So I just wrote 1,000 words or more every day for the summer. And then I had most of a book when I was done, like a linked story collection. And I didn't have an agent. And I didn't really know anyone in the fiction world at all. And I went to like a party in New York, and there were a lot of agents there, and there were a lot of editors there. And none of the agents would talk to me because I hadn't been published in the New Yorker. And none of the editors would talk to me because I didn't have an agent. And then I found one young assistant who we were just chatting, and she said, "Oh, send me your stories." I sent them to her, and then she didn't respond for 2 months, and then I emailed her again, and she said, "Oh, these are really good." And she kind of helped me to find my agent, and then she wasn't actually able to buy the book, but then I had an agent, and he ended up selling my book. And that little editorial, I say little because she's short, editorial assistant is now the publisher of Flatiron Books, Megan Lynch. So she and I have like grown up together for 15 years, where I've watched her sort of like rise. And I'm now with Echo. That's why I said Echo, but she used to be at Echo. Anyway, so I've watched her rise, and it really was that chance meeting at a party, New York story, and that's how it got started. But I've really had my ups and downs in my career. My third book actually really tanked hard, and I got dropped by my publisher. And I've had like 4 publishers at this point.
Do you know? Like, do you have a sense of what the problem was with the third book?
Well, I think that I feel like for both the second and the third book, they just didn't really know how to market me, and they kind of like kept pigeonholing me. And I was writing kind of, I write kind of dark stuff, and they were kind of marketing maybe a little bit lighter, and they just didn't know what to do with it. And so when I finally got to my fourth book, and I've been with the same editor since, she said, we're just going to say you're a really great writer. We're not going to say you're this. We're not going to say you're that. We're just going to give you a great cover, and we're going to say that you're smart and great and funny and put you out into the world. And for me, like that's really what I needed, was just the chance to be myself, you know. And I mean, I dream of like I'm definitely dream of like being that person who has like the same, like you have a signature look and feel to your work, and everyone knows who you are. Like we could look at your covers, and if your name wasn't on it, we would still know, you know, you have a really specific essence to your work. And I feel like sometimes with my work, I'm experimenting, I'm trying all these different kinds of things. And I sometimes wish I could just figure it out, but I do feel like the joy for me in writing is that process of figuring it out, something new each time for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. And also, you know, the downside of what I do is that I couldn't do something new. Like I really,
yes,
I can only do something new within my brand. So, you know, I've done different like did a murder mystery, and I did, you know, historical, yeah. But it has to be within my brand. And so, you know, I think you have more freedom, which I'm sure you appreciate. You know, I'm sure you appreciate it.
I do appreciate it. There's definitely like, yeah, it's the grass is always greener kind of thing. But I mean, I just want to say that like the fact that like like how productive and prolific you are and how inventive you are is just really inspiring. It's really great. I'm like completely obsessed with your Instagram. Your Instagram was so good.
Very proud of Instagram. But, and what I tell people is that it's seriously 1% talent and 99% freaking work. And I am very disciplined. I'm like a Marine disciplined.
Yep.
And I get up every day and I do my freaking spin climb. Now I have a Peloton in my bedroom. So I do my spin, I go running, I do my bar class. It's like 3 hours of exercising. And then I do the stuff I have to do, but I work. And I'm never not working. I'm always working. And that's what you have to do. Like I never relax.
I feel like
never relax.
I feel like I think about it first thing when I wake up in the morning. I'm always kind of like pushing around words in my head. And I think about it right before I go to bed, so that like, you know, in hopes that my brain will sort of solve some problems in my, you know, of whatever I'm working on in my sleep. You know, I'm working on this nonfiction book now, and it's such a different experience writing about my life. I mean, I've written a lot of essays about my life before, which was kind of why I thought, oh, I can just collect them into something. But as it turns out, I'm actually like really expanding on so many things, and writing a lot about being a writer as well, and the struggle of being a writer. But you can't make anything up. I miss making things up.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the challenge with fiction, is that you have to make it have narrative. It's very difficult. You have to make it read like a narrative, but everything has to be true. And as we know, life does not read like a narrative. Life is random, and you know.
It's been a real challenge to figure out how to give like some sort of narrative arc to my book, because it's not like I always use Wilde as an example, because she had a beginning, middle, and end to this moment in her life. Like it was just beautiful. You know, I mean, obviously she told the story so beautifully. It was shaped so beautifully. But I don't have that same kind of. I haven't done it. I didn't do a big hiking trip. Let's put it that way. I just kind of like lived for a long time and wrote some books. But so that has been the challenge, is sort of like figuring out for there to be like a flow or a narrative arc to this book. And when life is really so kaleidoscopic, really, truly. I wonder, have you ever written any? I know this is supposed to be like you interviewing me, but of course I have questions for you. Have you ever done any nonfiction or thought about it?
You know, I've thought about doing a memoir that would be targeted like Cheryl, strands because I wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was thinking, oh, I'll write a memoir about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And then, because you can do it without any technical climbing experience, which is just mind-boggling. And then I thought I'd bring in all these challenges. Like I, had these 2 years back to back. I got divorced in 13 and I got breast cancer in 14 without a breather between them, honestly. And, I had little kids at that time and I had books due and how difficult it was to like go through a freaking divorce and then go through cancer. I had a double mastectomy. I had 5 surgeries in that year and what that was like and how the writing really kept me afloat, but somehow tied into the fact that I'm, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but I'm not sure that's ever going to happen. Probably not.
I mean, you could probably just write about the first 2 things. You don't even climb a mountain. That is a mountain in and of itself.
Yeah.
Many mountains probably in that. People would probably go gangbusters.
Does it have do the essays have a theme? Like, what does it have a title?
So it does.
Have a
It's called A Trip to the End of the World.
Okay.
And which is the title of one of the chapters. So there's 3 main threads to it. One is about being a writer, and the beginning of the book starts with when my 3rd book was tanking, and I was like on a book tour for it, and like really in denial that my book tour was tanking. But on that book tour, I saw a ghost. And so there's a second thread about me kind of visiting these places around the world that are like catacombs and cemeteries and ossuaries and things like that just sort of came up in my travel. And I noticed that I sort of had become really interested in it because I'd seen this ghost. So part of it is about like kind of like my interest in these otherworldly places and travel in general, because I have done so much travel for, what we do. And then the third strand of it is really about being a woman and the challenges of being a woman in America in particular. Yeah. So I think it's going to be good and juicy and I've written so many essays, you write these like little 1,000-word essays for magazines when your book comes out about like a specific moment in your life, right? Like there's like I can do those now. Like I got really good at doing those, and I your book comes out, you publish 3 of them or whatever it is. It's just part of the whole package. And then what happened was when I started to look at all of those essays, I mean, I've probably written 100 of those essays over the years.
Right.
And I looked at them and I was like, I don't know if these are really telling all of the truth. Because it's the nature of nonfiction, of creative nonfiction, is that you're sort of compressing, you're automatically compressing, you're choosing a path, you're choosing a thread to focus on. And so it made me realize that I wanted to write more about these specific moments in my life. And so things have sort of gone from there and gotten bigger. I don't know. I'm only about halfway through. So, when you're only halfway through a book, like ask me at the end what it's about.
Did I see? Okay, and is that part of a 2-book deal, Jami, that you had? I mean, is there a novel to that as well, or more nonfiction?
So no, it'll be a novel next. I also felt like after I finished the 7th book, all this, I was like, I weirdly felt like I needed a break from writing fiction. Yeah. I've kind of been writing little bits and pieces here and there. Just my brain sort of makes it happen, and I write it down, and then I'm not pressuring myself to like write something big. But it felt like a relief in a way to just take a break from it. As you know, it can be quite a grind, and the publishing process of putting out a novel can be quite a grind. And but what I've been told is that publishing like a memoir is actually worse. So I'm a little, just because it's like about you. So there's no, there's nothing to hide behind.
Right.
But I'll be 50 when it comes out. And that feels like a good time to be looking back And
Yeah.
and I think I'll be able to handle whatever comes my way in terms of reviews and press and things like that. I know I'm sort of offering myself up to be slaughtered a little bit because I have had some decadent. I am writing a little bit about like sex and drugs and.
So otherwise, I'm like, what's the point in reading it? I mean, that's like the exciting thing. That is the best content. You must have drama. You must have drama.
I think this is the one I'm going to tell my parents not to read.
Yeah, just be like, you know what, miss. Honestly.
Yeah. So I think it'll be. I don't know, but I do miss that inventiveness of writing fiction. I do miss it.
Yeah. I bet because you can't really, you can craft it, but you can't change it.
Right.
Truth. So, I mean, I'm sure that's very challenging. So I guess I'll end by asking you a question that I get asked all the time. What is your advice for aspiring writers?
Oh my gosh. I almost never get asked that question. I want to hear your answer after I think of what mine is. It probably is the same as everybody's, which is read everything, write every day, treat it, if you want it to be your job, you have to treat it like it's your job, which was like really helpful for me, was not having it be playtime anymore, but really sitting down and doing the work every single day and saying, this is serious and this is what I want this is what I want for my life. So that's what I would say is, it's like any career, any job, really, in a way, and so you have to take it seriously and be disciplined.
Yeah,
it's not very fun.
My answer is very hard. You start at the beginning and you move to the end, and so many people get stuck in chapter 3 and they just stick it in a drawer. It is persistence.
Yeah.
You go back and fix it later, but you have to start and you have to move to the end. And I also think that, dramatization, I went to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and all we talked about was dramatization, which is essentially show, don't tell. So start with a scene, put your characters in a scene. We can hear about their backstory later. My favorite scene we'll just end with All This Can Be Yours, is when Twyla is in the CVS. I love that scene so much because I couldn't really tell what it was. First of all, we don't know what's wrong with her. Yeah. And also, so she's obviously having a panic attack, etc. in the CVS, but the way you describe the CVS is so beautifully, brilliantly done. Uh-huh. And now a place that literally had zero literary interest for any of us until you read your description of it, and then you're like, the CVS can be literary because here it is, gorgeously evoked in Jami's novel. All This Could Be Yours. I was just in awe of the way you took the random, mundane trip to CVS and made it something really very special.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Means a lot to me. Thank you.
I should have asked Jami about Sid. Jami has a dog.
Oh, here, I'll put him on the screen. Hold on. Come here.
Jami has a dog who's very charismatic and photogenic. And here he is. Oh my God, I feel like I'm seeing a complete celebrity.
He's so fat. He got real fat during quarantine. Oh, buddy. He's like, I want to go to sleep. All right.